Now I want to bring in Jenny Town. She's the Assistant Director of the U.S. North Korea Institute. She's also the Managing Editor and Producer of 38 North. So Jenny, thank you so much for joining us. So we've got a sense of what this summit was all about. They have agreed to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and also the pursuit of the end of the Korean War. Now what denuclearization actually means, that we don't know. And there really wasn't much in the way of details or what the next steps are in the timeline. What's your analysis of this summit?
Well, I do think it is significant that Kim Jong-un did agree to and commit to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in writing. It does create the mandate to really then explore what this means and figure out the details. And I think, the South Koreans had to be a little bit careful not to put in too much detail in order not to create obligations ahead of the US-DPRK summit that could complicate those negotiations. So I think, the South Koreans did what they needed to do to get the commitments, to create the mandate, to create the space for those and the momentum for those broader talks to happen with the U.S. and then eventually with China as well.
So many people have been watching this, though, with a hefty dose of skepticism. This is not the first time that we've seen a similar agreement. In 2007, 11 years ago, the six-party talks sort of produced a similar set of agreements, and then nothing happened. Now, I understand we're talking about different leadership in North Korea now, but, why should we expect things to be different this time around, or should we not?
Well, I think we have to, as Chunanbum said, I think we have to give somewhat the benefit of the doubt here. And I think, there is a lot that can be done, and Kim Jong-un has created a lot of space for himself as well by already declaring victory on the nuclear weapons front. So, in a phased process, you would go after the easy things first. And so there's a lot he can give up now and very quickly in terms of testing, in terms of development infrastructure, in terms of even, for instance, fissile material production capabilities, if he already feels comfortable with the programs that he has. And those things would be in the national interest of everyone involved, and then would leave the more difficult parts to a time when there is a more fundamental change in the political relationship as we go forward in this process.
And I guess the other big question is why now? It certainly seems like the timeline leading up to this summit, it happened quite rapidly. There was sort of all this sniping back and forth via Twitter with Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. They were using all this inflammatory language. And then next thing you know, North Korea is at the Olympics, and now we're at a summit. I mean, it's really in just a matter of months. So the question is, why now? In 2007, North Korea was under an incredible financial pressure. People were dying. There was a famine. They had a reason to come to the table. Why is Kim Jong-un coming to the table now?
Well, I think there are a number of factors at play here, including, I think there was a real fear that military options were in the works, that war was imminent, especially in South Korea and Japan. I think it created, an impetus, a real urgency to solve this problem in a way that would prevent war from happening. And I think you hear those messages out of South Korea during the summit as well, really emphasizing that there cannot be war on the Korean Peninsula. And at the same time, North Korea did go out of its way over the past 2 years to really finish what it feels now is a credible nuclear deterrent. And so it can turn that corner and now really focus on the other side of its policy area, which is the economic development, which will require better relations with the rest of the world and repairing some of the relations that were lost during the development phase. And so, I do think they are econ focused now, and there are concessions that they're willing to make and that they can make very easily when we move down that path.
So one of the issues that has not come up, Moon Jae-in has not brought it up, President Trump has not brought it up, are the human rights issues. We know that there are a number of Americans that are still being held by North Korea. The U.S. did not make that, at least thus far, a prerequisite for the president meeting with Kim Jong-un, or even these meetings leading up to the meeting. No one's actually sort of brought up the Americans that are being imprisoned there. We remember Otto Warmbier. His parents have filed a lawsuit against North Korea. Can we expect human rights issues to become a focus or an issue further on? I could understand why now things are very delicate and you might not want to bring it up.
No, I think at this point you have to include it. What role it plays in the negotiations will be interesting to watch, but you can't really avoid the issue at this point because it does also stand in the way of normalization of relations. And so if Kim Jong-un, as part of the fundamental political changes that will have to happen to have confidence in any security guarantees in order to get to a denuclearization end state, that normalization is going to have to deal with these trickier issues on the human rights front in order to build up that political will.
Jenny Town, thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks.
Well, this historic meeting between North